One of the most impressive things about our world is the incredible way that we've learned how to work together with Pokemon. We have things like Pokemon working in construction, Pokemon in sports, and, of course, the major part of society, Pokemon battling. It's an incredible form of symbiosis that we've developed with most of the creatures in this world. One of the most impressive ways that this happens, at least in my opinion, are the Pokemon that work around the world in healthcare. My first exposure to these kinds of Pokemon are, of course, Audino and the Unova Pokemon Centers, and we've talked in this series about how Drowsy line is very heavily used for anesthesia. But whenever you think of Pokemon Centers in most of the places around the world, you think of one of the Pokemon from this evolutionary line. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Pokemon Care Guides, where we go through how you would raise and care for different Pokemon species in your own home. Today, we'll be talking about the helpful, caring, egg Pokemon Happiny and its evolutions Chansey and Blissey. Happiny is a small Pokemon. Technically, I think it's classified as one of the handful of baby Pokemon, standing only 2 feet tall, 0.6 meters, and weighing an average of 54 pounds, 24.4 kilos. Pretty much the size of a toddler. If you were wondering what being a baby Pokemon entails, I do go more into detail of that in the Pikachu Care Guide when I first talk about Pichu, but in essence, a baby Pokemon is a Pokemon that comes about through some special circumstances through the breeding. And when they hatch, they have reduced capabilities when compared to other non-baby Pokemon at the same stage of life. Happiny is a Pokemon with a predominantly pink body, though it does come in 2 shades. The lower half of the Pokemon is the darker pink, with a pouch that runs completely around the entirety of its body. Its upper body is ovoid in shape, with what looks like a ponytail on the top of its head, complete with hairband-like growth and 3 bumps on its forehead. Lastly, its hands and feet are simply small nubs without any fingers or toes. I should also mention that Happiny have an instinctual drive to place anything that remotely looks like an egg into their pouch and carry it around. That's because the Happiny line, or at least the later 2 evolutions, are some of the only non-avian Pokemon known to produce unfertilized eggs. Normally, the only time that a non-avian Pokemon produces an egg is when they're actually reproducing. But the Chansey line functions almost like any bird Pokemon, except for Happiny. They're too young and underdeveloped to start producing eggs just yet, hence their status as a baby Pokemon. But that instinct to carry an egg is still ingrained in them, so they're often found carrying around smooth, egg-shaped rocks or things of that nature. And after some time, once they've bonded with that one stone strongly enough, they will evolve into a Chansey. Chansey keeps the same ovoid, pink, egg-shaped body plan, and realistically does not change that much from Happiny at all. Its pouch is now smaller, only occupying its stomach area instead of its entire lower body. It also, instead of something that looks like a ponytail, now has 3 appendages on either side of its head, looking more like long hair. And aside from the tail that it now has, the last difference between it and its previous evolution is that it's just bigger, standing an average of 3 feet 7 inches, 1.1 meters, and weighing 76.3 pounds, or 34.6 kilos. And after a Chansey has had enough time to bond with a person or other Pokemon strongly enough, then it will evolve into a Blissey. Blissey's pink coloration is much darker than its previous evolutions, and its lower body past its waist is now white in color. Combine that with the almost feather-like protrusions coming off of its waist and its shoulders, and it almost looks like it has a dress on. Where on a Chansey the hair-like appendages on its head were straight, Blisseys are now pulled up closer to the head and more fluffy and curled. And the last major physical difference between it and its previous evolution is, of course, its size. Blissey now reaches the height of a short human, standing just under 5 feet tall, or 1.5 meters, and weighing about 103 pounds, which comes out to be 46.8 kilograms. Overall, this is a very biologically simple species, but that doesn't exactly mean that its care will be just as simple. So, let's get into the guide and find out if the nurse Pokemon could possibly be the perfect Pokemon partner for you. Enclosure. Thanks to the gentle and caring nature of these Pokemon, as well as their long history of working with humans, the best enclosure for them is also the easiest. These Pokemon can live pretty easily in your home. After all, they don't have any elemental needs, they're actually pretty smart based on the fact that they're being used in helping with medical care, and they don't have a belligerent or destructive nature whatsoever. Accommodating them is really easy. That's not to mean they don't need anything at all, though. They will need space. Due to the rounded nature of these Pokemon, they tend to take up a lot more space than people do, so you'll have to make sure that there's room in your home for them by spacing out your furniture and making sure that your doorways are wide enough for them. As well, they'll need a bed that is large enough for them to sleep in. A twin-size bed will be just fine for all of the evolutions, though Happiny will need help getting into that bed. There are sets of small stairs that you can buy online that go alongside the beds for this exact reason, so you should be able to get them into the bed pretty easily. Only thing is that these Pokemon are very social Pokemon, so putting them in their own room, they don't like too much. Thanks to how empathetic and caring these Pokemon are, they like to be around people that they bond with. It'll be a matter of training them to get to the point where they aren't attached to you at the hip, but we can cover that later on in the care section. For now, I bring this up because without that training, you'll have to have them in the room with either you or someone else, like the kids, which they'll do fine with, thanks to their gentle disposition. Since these Pokemon are very much attuned to the positive energy of their surroundings, you should also be sure to decorate your house in positive ways. I already mentioned the open space needed for them, but you should be sure to have the house be very bright. Bright colors for the walls, lots of natural light, decent airflow, things that foster a positive outlook and open feelings. If your house is very dark, closed in, with little to no natural light, then a Happiny evolution Pokemon won't do well in your home. Not to say that that's bad. If you like that aesthetic, then you do you. Just consider a ghost-type Pokemon instead of a Happiny evolution. When it comes to Pokemon that can be housed with them, the main thing that you want to avoid is having them interact with anything that is overly aggressive. Happiny and its later forms are just not built for aggression, both mentally and physically. They would much rather run away from any conflict that another Pokemon has with them. This is what has led to problems with the wild population, which we'll go into in a bit, but when it comes to you housing these Pokemon, it means that any Pokemon that doesn't have the same attitude as them is gonna stress your Happiny evolution out. Territorial Pokemon like the Gible and Pinsir lines, competitive Pokemon like Charizard and the Tyrogue lines, and even just the ones that are toxic just through existence like the Grimer and Coughing lines, these are all bad ideas for interaction with your Happiny evolution. Really, since it's living in your home, the best companions are going to be other well-trained house Pokemon. Things like the Growlithe line, the Pikachu line, so long as they're well-trained enough to be docile around your egg Pokemon, then it'll be just fine. Slowpoke is also a good example of a good companion for these Pokemon, though the Slowpoke line are more outside Pokemon than inside Pokemon, so their interactions would be more infrequent than with another inside Pokemon. And yeah, I can't really think of anything else special that you have to do for these Pokemon regarding their enclosure. These guys are really simple when it comes to their housing needs. You'll have to see if that simplicity translates over to its care and availability. Availability. For the longest time, these Pokemon were very rare in the wild. They could only be found in places that had been deliberately stocked with them, like the old Safari Zone that was in the Kanto region, or the Trophy Garden here in Sinnoh. But, thankfully, over the years, and thanks to conservation and repopulation efforts, their numbers have begun to steadily increase as time goes on. They can now be found on routes 13 through 15 in Kanto, which may be due to the escaping of some individuals from the Safari Zone, as well as routes 209 and 210 in Sinnoh, and most commonly the Pony Plains in Alola, though they have been known to sporadically show up in other places across the islands. The most drastic change in their wild populations actually comes from Paldea and Galar, mainly the site of Isle of Armor. In these two spots, they have exploded in population, covering a large portion of the land. That's not to say they're common by any means, but you stand a much better chance of running into one of them there than you do anywhere else. And that is just for Chansey, the middle stage. Funny enough, the first and third stages are the rare ones. Happiny is rare due to the nature of its biology. Happiny, as I've said, is yet another baby Pokemon, just like Cleffa and Pichu that we've talked about before. And, just like those two Pokemon, the best way to get a Happiny from a Chansey isn't as simple as mating a Pokemon with a Chansey and letting the egg hatch. A Happiny will only be made when a Chansey is exposed to a special mix of incense herbs called a luck incense during the mating process. As you can imagine, this special blend of incense is rare in the wild, so often a Chansey mating will just result in another Chansey. And we in the breeding industry weren't able to figure it out until way after the evolutionary line was discovered. So, trying to get a Happiny in the wild is going to be much, much harder than a Chansey. And then, when we talk about Blissey, the third evolution, it's even more rare in the wild than Happiny. Mostly because Blissey is classified as a friendship evolution, where the Pokemon needs to form a strong bond through emotional connection with another creature that it triggers the evolution. The issue with that is that a wild Chansey is extremely shy, with everything. For a wild Chansey to form the necessary bond on its own like that is a very, very unlikely scenario. And so, that leads to Blissey rarely appearing in the wild. Luckily, these days, the breeder industry has picked up the slack when it comes to these Pokemon. Due to the species being all female, which I just realized I didn't mention before, so I'll get into that in a second, it makes it very easy to breed and increase the population of these Pokemon in a controlled setting. You see, I'm sure that plenty of you have heard that there doesn't have to be two Pokemon of the same species for them to breed. The breeding industry has classifications called egg types or egg groups, and when two Pokemon of the same egg group mate, then they will produce a member of the mother species, with genetic information from the father species that influences what moves and abilities the child will have. It's most often done by breeders that sell their Pokemon to the competitive scene. But for Chansey, where the entirety of the species is female, it's very easy to find breeders in their egg group that can mate with them and then produce either another Chansey or a Happiny. Combine that with their incredible ability to pop out eggs, and the breeders have done a wonderful job at just producing more of these Pokemon. To that end, getting a Happiny and a Chansey should be pretty easy. The only issue is that if you want a Blissey, then you'll have to do it the long way. Taking a Pokemon that evolves through friendship and then removing it from that bond can cause a lot of problems for the Pokemon afterward. If there's a breeder that's willing to sell you a Blissey without giving you the companion Pokemon, if it's even a Pokemon that they've formed a bond with, then that is a very sketchy breeder, and you should report them to the proper authorities for possible Pokemon mistreatment. I should also mention that with Happiny being a baby Pokemon, it's often better to keep the Pokemon with the mother until it evolves, as baby Pokemon often need something from the Pokemon around them. Happiny is one of the rare baby Pokemon that won't suffer from being separated from the mother, since it doesn't really get anything from a Chansey or a Blissey that it can't get from another creature, but it's still considered bad to separate them on principle, so if you do find a breeder that's willing to sell you a Happiny, then be aware that, while not harmful to the Pokemon itself, it's still a frowned upon practice. Catchability. If you decide you want to try and catch one of the rarer wild Pokemon from this line, then you better have plenty of patience. Not only is finding one in the wild hard, like I mentioned, these Pokemon are very shy. If they notice you coming near them, then they're going to bolt, and despite their egg-shaped body, they are surprisingly fast. You will need to either get the drop on them, or have a Pokemon that has some way to keep them nearby. The one exception to this is if you are a pretty good actor. These Pokemon have an instinctual need to help those that are wounded or hurt. Their eggs are well known to have some healing properties, and for anyone who they feel are decent people, they are willing to give you one of their eggs to recover with. If you're able to put on a good enough act of being hurt near these wild Pokemon, then they may come over to investigate and give you the chance to get closer to them. Of course, you're lying to them, and the instant you move to catch them, they're going to recognize that and flee. Even if you do manage to catch them at that point, it may not be worth it considering you'll be wounding the trust between you and your Pokemon on day 1. Not an insurmountable hurdle to cover, but it's going to make bonding with them even harder than it already is. Just remember to always protect yourself first and foremost. Bring a Pokemon along to protect you. Even though the Happiny line aren't aggressive and they tend to flee instead of fight, they're not the only thing out there, and you could very easily end up running into something much more dangerous than a Chansey. And as for what Pokeballs to use for this line, Great Balls should be good enough for both Chansey and Blissey, and for the very rare Happiny that you'll find in the wild, a Pokeball should be plenty strong enough. Though, with their tendency to flee from you, the best one for this might just be the Quick Ball in all honesty. Care. Much like the Tyrogue line, the care for this line is going to start with adjusting your lifestyle in certain ways. Specifically, the Happiny line is very good at sensing intentions and morality. Granted, morality is subjective, so I'm not exactly sure what causes these Pokemon to view one person as morally bad and another as morally good, but it seems that people that are kind, friendly, open-minded, and open-hearted are the kind of people that these Pokemon are drawn to. I know, especially these days, it can be very hard to keep that mindset. So here are a few lifestyle tips that should help you with reaching that goal. One is exercise. It has been proven that regular exercise does help to boost endorphins and thus helps with good mood and positivity. Going out for a run every other day, some calisthenics, and maybe a bit of gentle weightlifting can do wonders for your mental state. Another good practice to develop is having a good community of people around you. Whether that be family, or friends, or gaming buddies, or whatever you're able to find, having a group of people that you can reach out to and have healthy, genuine connections with has been proven to help people stave off a lot of the more negative feelings that can take root in the human mind. Though, I should give you some warnings, especially as an adult, forming that group can take time and effort and might even take a few false starts. My best advice is to focus on your hobbies and just branch out from there. And the last major thing that would help you form a positive attitude is therapy. I know there might be a natural aversion to therapy, especially if you feel like you don't have any issues that a therapist could help with, but just having someone that you can really open up with and help explore your own mind and past can help a lot with having this mindset. You may uncover things that you didn't know you were still grappling with or that are still affecting you. If you do any or all of these things, then it should help you become a more positive person and, therefore, help to set your Happiny line of Pokemon at ease around you. If the Pokemon feel that you aren't open or positive enough, then they'll start to feel uncomfortable around you and want to avoid you, and if it gets bad enough, then they may even run away. A bad mood here and there won't cause any problems, but true negativity and spitefulness is going to cause problems between you and the Pokemon. Another thing to keep in mind are the eggs that these Pokemon are famous for producing. Chansey and Blissey will always produce a new egg whenever they do not have one in their pouch. They are unfertilized, so long as no male was involved in the process at any point, and will stay good for some time while in the Pokemon's pouch. You have to understand that these eggs are completely edible and highly nutritious for you, much more than any other egg that you can get in the store normally. And this is important for you to know because the gifting of these eggs are a very personal thing for these Pokemon. They only give them to those that they really trust, and for you to take them shows that you really care for them as well. Rejecting one, while there isn't much evidence that it affects the Pokemon, I can't imagine that it'll be good for the Pokemon's self-esteem. Also, these Pokemon don't seem to care if you eat the egg afterward, especially since the eggs have some healing effects to them when they get eaten, and they tend to give them to the injured, so I'm assuming they expect it to be eaten. So, as another bonus to having these Pokemon, you get massively healthy eggs on a regular basis. The only exception that I have to point out for this is the first stage Happiny. Being classified as a baby Pokemon, they aren't mature enough to produce eggs of their own yet. However, they do have that same maternal, caring instinct that the rest of these Pokemon have. To that end, they often find a roughly oval-shaped stone that they can carry around with them, simulating having an egg. Also, through bonding with a stone like this through a long enough period of time, this is how these Pokemon evolve into a Chansey. And finally, a Happiny that has bonded with another Pokemon or person will often give their stone to that bonded creature in a form of friendship and care, much like how the later evolutions will give away eggs. As you can clearly tell, these stones are very important for the Pokemon, as without that stone, they can start to become anxious, nervous, and it can even progress to full-on depression should they go long enough without this need fulfilled. If you have a Happiny, then either you need to help it find a stone quickly after it arrives at your home, or preferably, have one ready that you can give to your Pokemon. Not only will this cover that need for your Pokemon, but it's also going to act as a wonderful beginning sign of friendship and trust between you and the Pokemon. Food-wise, these Pokemon are herbivores, and as such, feeding them can be very easy to handle. You want to give them a variety of leafy greens and fruits. Good examples are things like lettuce, cabbage, spinach, raspberries, apples, and watermelon. You want to lean more towards the veggies than the fruit, as the fruit can have a lot of sugars in them, and if you overfeed them, it can lead to your Pokemon getting a bit on the chunky side. I'd say that 3/4 of the food should be veggies, with the last quarter being made of a variety of fruits. Also, for the older evolutions, you want to dust their food with a calcium powder and a protein powder. With how many eggs these Pokemon produce over their lifetime, they need to have a ready source of calcium and protein to stay healthy and have healthy eggs as well. How much of each really depends on what brand you get and the size of your individual Pokemon, so be sure to check the back of the container or look up online how much you're going to need to use per meal. As for how much to feed them, due to their similarity to the human diet, absent the meat, they don't get measured in weight like other Pokemon. They instead get measured based on caloric intake, meaning you'll have to measure out how much you should be feeding them on your own. Happiny should be getting around 1,400 calories per day, divided between 3 meals a day. That increases up to about 1,800 calories for a Chansey, now divided between 2 meals. Lastly, Blissey gets about 2,100 calories a day, close to the average for an adult human woman, still divided between 2 separate meals. As for how to feed them, that's really up to you. Since these are household Pokemon, and smart ones at that, you could choose to teach them to sit at the table and eat from a plate when you do, including them in dinner, or you could give them their own space and a dish that they can eat from. It's really a matter of personal preference, though you all know that I lean more toward the family dinner method with smarter and more human intelligence Pokemon. Last is how to interact with these Pokemon, and really the only sticking point in this is going to be the shyness that they feel around you when you first get them. When these Pokemon first meet you, they're going to be shy and nervous around you. This would be slightly mitigated if you get a Pokemon through a breeder, as they'll be more used to humans, but even still, you'll have to put in the work to gain their trust and get them to be more comfortable. To that end, it's important that you approach these Pokemon with patience and trust and friendliness. Let them come to you. Don't force anything. Always try to keep an air of openness about you, and they will surely warm up to you pretty quick. Especially if you go through the lifestyle options that I lined out before, they'll warm to you very quickly, and then after that, you'll be able to work with them to teach them how to live in your house, and thanks to how smart they are, you'll have very little issue with that. The only sticking point that I should mention with this training and this bond that's forming with you is the attachment issues. See, these Pokemon can swing from being too shy and not wanting to be around you to suddenly being velcroed to your hip. It's something to watch out for, as nobody wants a large round Pokemon attached to them at all times, but if you go through the training and you keep an eye on it, then you should be able to avoid it fairly easily. Cost. Food-wise, you're looking at about the low or moderate category per month. Buying veggies in bulk can really help to bring the costs down, or even growing your own can really bring the cost down. The part that can bring the cost up somewhat are the supplements that you get for the later Pokemon. Depending on the brand and how much you buy at once, the prices are going to vary wildly. The enclosure is going to be in the low category. After all, they're living in your home. The most that you're going to have to spend money on are the things like the beds and the food dish and things like that. Even with those small things, it's nowhere near where you would have to spend to build a whole new enclosure for them. And finally, the Pokemon itself is going to cost you in the moderate category. Thanks to the ease in breeding them and the ease in keeping a large number of them in a singular space, they are very easy to breed and raise. Combine that with the fact of rising numbers in the wild and the high demand to have these Pokemon trained for Pokemon Center work, and you should be able to easily find a breeder that's willing to sell you one of these Pokemon. The only reason that the price isn't lower is due to the demand on them for eggs and for Pokemon for the medical industry. Conclusion. These Pokemon are fantastic household Pokemon. Their attitudes are great, their enclosures are easy, and the care for them is uncomplicated and straightforward. Add on top of that the natural caring instinct and easy trainability, and these Pokemon would be great for households with small children or other small Pokemon. If you have someone in your life looking for a friendly and easy Pokemon to have in their lives, or is a beginner wanting a Pokemon that's not common for people to have starting out, then the Happiny line are wonderful options, and you could very easily end up finding that they are the perfect Pokemon partners for you. Thank you all for listening, and please join us again next time when we talk about the vine ball of a Pokemon, Tangela, and its evolution Tangrowth. Have a wonderful night, everyone.